Well, even as Ukrainian President Zelensky delivered a powerful address to Congress yesterday, Russian air campaigns continue to batter cities throughout the war-torn country, including an airstrike on a theater where hundreds had gathered for shelter. We're seeing in real time the brutality of war given technology. We're joined now for an update on the latest news by freelance war correspondent Chuck Holton. Chuck reported on much of this from Ukraine and has since crossed the border into Romania. Chuck, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Now, you're in Romania, but what is the latest from Ukraine as you crossed over? What was the sense after President Zelensky addressed the U.S. Congress?
Well, it was an easy day crossing the border. It was only a 3-hour wait out in the cold with no shelter, no bathroom. It's really torturous getting across. And they said, oh, if you had come yesterday or the day before, it was much, much longer. I don't know how they get away actually making people stand out in the cold that long with children and old people and that sort of thing. But
now, which side of the border is that on? Is that on the Romanian side of the border?
No, that's actually on the Ukrainian side. That was actually to get out of Ukraine, to cross through the border checkpoint on the Ukraine side. Took very, very long. They only had 2 people working, and they had hundreds of people in line. And then actually getting across the Romanian part was very simple. They just waved you on through. And there were once you got through, there was a lot of help to be had from NGOs and Christian organizations that are there passing out food and warm hats and things like that.
So what's the delay coming out of Ukraine? Why the long lines getting out? I mean, I would think they would be wanting people to get to safety quickly.
I think any former Soviet country, red tape is kind of like the national sport. And so that was part of it. But they also have this they're not allowing any men from age 18 to 60 to leave the country without a very good reason. So any men that were in line, had to go through a lot of checks and things like that. But also, they are letting women and children go first. And so if you're a man like me, you're sitting there letting the women go first, and then more people show up and they let the women go first, and then more people show up, and so on and so forth. So you just keep getting pushed further and further back in the line. And that's why it took me so long to get across.
So, Chuck, are you hearing anything positive on the negotiations for peace there between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, what we're seeing is this horrific amount of civilian deaths, basically terrorism that's being engaged in by Russia. And that actually is sort of good news in a way. I hate to say it that way, but what that means is that Russia feels like that's its only option at this point, because they are losing so badly on the battlefield. Whenever they engage Ukrainian forces, they are losing. And they've lost so many tanks and so many armored personnel carriers and so many helicopters that they really don't want to engage the Ukrainians. And they are out of a lot of things: fuel, ammunition, food. And so as they're running out of everything, the only thing they have left is these Smerch rockets that they just kind of launch at will. Then they have, rockets they launch from aircraft, and they're launching them on civilian targets because it's easier. But that shows that they are getting desperate and they're losing militarily. And so I think you're starting to see in the negotiations some wiggle room where they're starting to say, okay, well, maybe we're not going to give you ultimatums anymore, but maybe we'll actually talk about something to get this war stopped. And I think you will see that continue in the weeks to come,
as the Ukrainians continue to hold the line, which they seem to be doing
suffer,
quite well.
Right.
Yes. Chuck, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to talk with you, and appreciate the reports you've provided to us over the last few weeks.
All right.